Okay, and then for our program, it's kind of a multi-phase program. We're going to start with a video on the legacy of grace. And our board, as we talked about how we would celebrate the 30th anniversary, we thought it might be neat to have sort of like a Channel 2 public television history video. So where you interview different people. And that's what we did, is when I was in the Philippines, I interviewed some people there, and I interviewed our board members here. Plus, I dug back into the archives of PAMI and found some old pictures and video that I spliced it all together. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. And after that, then I'll talk some more detail about my visit. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, Legacy of Grace, and reminiscing about the early days of PAMI, or we'd say PAMI here, but they say PAMI there, and remembering significant PAMI people who have passed away to heaven ahead of us. I especially enjoyed reminiscing and remembering as I sorted through and edited and spliced together those old pictures and the past and current video. I think it's especially fitting to do reminiscing and remembering as we celebrate the 30th anniversary. Isn't it amazing at all that God has done through PAMI in the last 30 years? It's amazing, and it's grace through and through. It's only by grace that God could keep the mission going for so long. It's only by grace that vision, finances, and people were provided all along the way. It's only by grace that so much has been done with relatively small resources. It kind of reminds me of like David and Goliath, or the feeding of the 5,000 with just a handful of fishes and loaves. It's only by the grace of God. It's all by the grace of God. The past, the present, and the future of this mission all depend on the grace of God. Where the first half of the evening was focused on the beginnings of PAMI, the second half will focus now on the current events of PAMI, but the underlying theme is still God's grace. I'm going to now walk you through some slides from this last summer, mainly from my month-long impromptu visit to the Philippines in June. This was my 5th time to the Philippines, and the first time to travel alone. I mainly went this time because Pastor Chito was very sick with lung cancer, and I was concerned that he was near death. Since he's been the overall field director of PAMI for the last 8 years, and has been EBI director and mission bookkeeper even longer, I knew that his sickness or death would greatly impact the whole mission. Besides that, I felt compelled to be there to encourage him and his family, since he's been a long-time close friend, who I consider like a brother. Before I get into the specifics of my June visit, I want to tell you a few things about Pastor Chito. His history with PAMI goes back a long ways. And we need to back it up once. He started attending EBI in 1985 and graduated in 1989. He was in the second batch, while his wife Opal was in the first batch. They married sometime after graduation and eventually had 5 children, 3 boys followed by 2 girls. The oldest is 20 and the youngest is 7. And this is a picture that was taken at the beginning of April when he was visited by a couple from Hong Kong that found out about PAMI through our website and had been sponsoring him for the last couple of years. I had been planning to visit this fall, but when I heard Pastor Chito had gone to the hospital on May 23rd with potential end-stage symptoms, I scrambled to find a way to use frequent flyer miles to get there as soon as possible. I left on May 31st with the intention of staying just under 3 weeks. After a couple days of travel, I finally got to Sorsogon Province. I immediately went to see Pastor Chito, who'd been in the hospital for 10 days, and we prayed and fellowshiped together. Sister Opal noted that they were very encouraged that I had come, and that Pastor Chito had tears in his eyes when he normally doesn't cry. We read passages like Philippians chapter 1, verses 20 to 24. Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far, but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. We prayed for miraculous healing so that Pastor Chito could continue to minister to others. By God's grace, he'd already lived almost a year since being diagnosed with lung cancer on July 1st, 2011. This was already a miracle, since people with cancer like that typically live less than 6 months. But the next day, we were surprised by another big miracle. The EBI church service had just gotten done, and then Pastor Chito unexpectedly showed up on campus. And it turned out that his health had rallied enough to come home. And what a gift it was for him to be home the next 1.5 weeks with relatively good health. The swelling in his feet and legs were down. He didn't need any IVs or oxygen. He had less pain in his back. He had a good appetite, and he was able to sleep. In fact, I started thinking he might have at least a few months left. And he seemed well enough that I even thought it was okay to spend maybe a few days away to visit Mulan and Cassie-Guerin and Earson along the way. And I'll talk more about that later. But at home, Pastor Chito would spend a lot of time sitting in a recliner in the living room. A lot of different people would stop by and visit and pray with him there. And it was a blessing that he remained so joyful and full of health. By the way, this was right after the church service, and we had communion there. All the cancer really slowed him down. He was still ministering to people. It was stated by many that came to encourage Pastor Chito that they left encouraged themselves. It was the same for me. By the way, this is Mama Hilda there. She's massaging Pastor Chito's feet with a home broom. She had this recipe to take it's 50% kerosene and 50% coconut milk, and then with a bunch of camphor dissolved into it. By God's grace, besides praying and fellowshipping with people, here's another few ways, or a few other things that Pastor Chito was able to do in those 1.5 weeks at home. That he was able to discuss contingency plans and talk about a plan with how the mission should be organized into 4 partitions. And this is him explaining the 4 partition plan. He drew the 4 partitions on the chalkboard or the blackboard there, and we had an all workers meeting. And then he was able to recommend. I asked him who should be the head of one of those partitions, and he recommended Pastor Boomer to be head of that 4th partition. And then he gave his blessing to Pastor Virgilio to be the overall head, while he and his wife would just concentrate on EBI, on Emmaus Bible Institute. He was also able to explain the changes, at this meeting. So we had a chance to talk one-on-one, but then he also talked with the other people to explain the plan. And all that was done on June 7th. And he also sat down at his computer and he typed up a schedule of classes for the start of the EBI school year, because the students were coming on June 11th, and there was some question of if things would be ready for the students when they came. And then he also, we talked about transferring the bakery equipment, which hadn't been used for like the last year and a half or so, transferring it to a different town, to one of our pastors in the town of Donsel, Pastor Abner, who has baking experience, and he was the first one to do the baking for us at EBI. So we thought that would be a good idea to transfer that, and Pastor Chito agreed on that. We talked about transferring Pastor Raphael from Katsiguran to help EBI, and then to move into the vacated bakery building. So, by the way, this is just the bakery equipment that was packed up into a jeepney, so it could be transferred. Some stuff is up in the top. And then this is Pastor Raphael moving into the former bakery building. And that worked out just right, because having Pastor Raphael and his wife Elsie there, they used to be at the Bible school. Pastor Raphael used to be the pastor of the campus church, and Elsie, both he and her were teachers, so it's especially nice having them back there to help Opal run the Bible school. So after that nice 1.5 weeks at home, Pastor Chito went back to the hospital for a blood transfusion. We thought it was just going to be going in there and coming back out again. But then he had a setback while he was in there, and it turned out that his blood type was kind of rare there, and they ran out of it. But amazingly, it also turns out that I have the same blood type, that we're both high achievers, we're both A+. Okay? And so I ended up being able to donate a unit of blood for him, and he received that the night before he passed away. So I like to think that this officially made us blood brothers, and that a little part of me went to heaven with him. Those last 2 days were pretty emotional. But when he passed away on the morning of June 15th, I found some peace in observing that the sky was clear blue and that there was cheerful birds flitting around in the inner courtyard of the hospital there. But the rest of that day was a little bit of an adventure. It was a Friday, and I was scheduled to go home on Monday. But I thought it would be good to extend my stay for 2 more weeks, to be there they do 10 days of memorial services, 10 days of visitation. So it'd be nice to be there for that, and to be there a few more days to help facilitate the smoother transition for the mission. But in order to do that, I need to get a visa extension from the immigration office that's in Legazpi. So with my companion, Pastor Lorenzo, we hopped on some transportation, and we managed to get to the office just to get my visa approved just 15 minutes before it closed for the weekend. And then through my wife Sue's help, I was also able to get my return flight rescheduled, and they didn't even charge us a change fee. So it all worked out. As Pastor Lorenzo and I were returning late that afternoon from Legazpi on a minibus, I received text messages saying that there was going to be a memorial service with PAMI workers that evening, and asking if I could give a message. Well, that capped off quite a day. When we arrived at EBI, the body was already laying and stayed in the church, and the body would stay there for the next 10 days with different groups of people taking turns maintaining a 24-hour-a-day vigil. I'd hear drums and singing at all hours of the day or night. You'd have different groups from different churches would come there to sing songs and to visit, and then they would have services in the afternoons and the evenings, and each evening would have at least a 2-hour service with at least 2 different speakers. And I always had to be ready to say something, whether it was a message or a prayer or a benediction or something. And then there was also a lot of good food. This was one of the intern students, and she was a great cook. And with all those people visiting, they always felt obligated to feed the people that were visiting. So this time I didn't lose weight like past times. There was too much good food. There's an example, and then people would just eat in this kind of kiosk outside. And then you'd have different people visiting, that here's Mrs. Ortiga, and then one of our first Bible school graduates, I think that's Maya, maybe? She's a pastor that's actually supported by Mrs. Ortiga now. So it was, some of this, being there for the memorial services, it was really nice because you got to see people from the past, plus you got to meet new people. Pastor Chito, here's Pastor Joel and his wife and daughter. Here's 4 sisters from Bulan. And here's a Korean missionary. And so I got to meet him for the first time. I met this other missionary guy, Mr. Crick. And then one day, I was in the office, and then I heard this loud screaming outside. And I went out to see, what's going on here, and I found a bunch of guys slaughtering a pig. And I guess for the night before the internment, they really like to have a big meal then, and they were getting the pig ready. They converted one of the kids' classrooms into a kitchen. And this is Pastor Chito's brother right here, one of his brothers. And his brothers, were coming from all over. Some from up in Manila, some from Saudi Arabia even. And but this guy, he was the master cook, and he explained to me that you take the pig meat and you split it into three sections, and you cook one with the bone, you cook one with the skin, and then you cook one with the liver. So, and then this is the internment, or the night before the internment. There's lots of people, probably 200 to 300 people there, we even, when I was there, we managed to get Wi-Fi on campus, and so we could even Skype with a former EBI student that's now in California that wanted to see the service. So, and then she talked with everyone on the screen. So that was interesting. And then the day of the funeral, then they wanted a lot of the people to be wearing white. And then they had me speak, plus the family members would speak. This is Pastor Chito's oldest son called Jethro, but all of the family spoke. That's his mom and his brothers and sisters. And then they had this big procession to the funeral. It's one of these things that they like to do up big. They see all the jeepneys there? It's what brought everyone from the campus to the cemetery. It's a cemetery. And it's kind of a pretty setting with the mountains in the background there. But so anyways, that's remembering Pastor Chito. But I want to share some other things too. like to share some other highlights besides just related to Pastor Chito's health and then the organizational transition, because on the lighter side, I was able to squeeze in and observe various ministries that continue to go strong despite all the difficulties. And just here's a few pictures and video of that. So, you switch that already, Sarah?
side of your worship folder, it says Grace Greater Than Our Sin.
Yeah.
for tonight is Amazing Grace.